Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I too, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I too will stand on the protocol already established as I wish you all a pleasant good evening. Now, to be truthful, I have to say, it is my distinct pleasure to add my words of welcome in this opening session of the Caribbean Sustainable Energy Forum for 2023 CSEF VIII under the theme Power in Transport. Now, the importance and timeliness of this forum needs really very little articulation as it contributes and represents yet another invaluable contribution to the CARICOM Energy Month as it provides another platform for knowledge exchange and shared learning from implementation experiences within CARICOM. Now, in contemplating the current dynamic within the regional energy space, the focus on power and transport is not a road paved with good intentions, but gives voice to an unvarnished truth. Indeed, the region is confronted with a paradox of development as it finds itself at yet another inflection point, where on the one hand, we are confronted by the prediction by the World Bank of oil prices hitting somewhere between, up to 150 US dollars per barrel by 2024, and therefore meaning even higher electricity rates if the Israeli-Hamas war morphs into a regional conflict. On the other hand, electrification and the adoption of renewable energy solutions within CARICOM is being hindered by supply chain challenges, archaic legislation, outdated power grids, and high interest rates. Indeed, we must remain mindful of the mounting concerns that some Caribbean countries may not be ready to transition to electric vehicles, insofar as in some jurisdictions, even 1% of total vehicle imports of EVs would or might bring significant strain to the electricity grid. However, as we transition on this new path, we must remain cognizant that the cost of electricity within the region has been persistently high over the past 2 decades. And even during periods of relatively low oil pricing, regional prices are on average around 4 times higher than what obtains in North America, with the obviously adverse impact on our regional competitiveness. Similarly, globally, mobility represents roughly between 20-25% of final energy consumption. The vast majority of CARICOM member states, however, exceeds this global average, and in one instance, the transport sector records over 60% of total energy consumption, also far exceeding the consumption by the electricity sector. Therefore, diversifying energy portfolios with indigenous renewable energy reduces geopolitical security risks, import dependency, and the variability of electricity generation costs. Access to clean, reliable, and affordable energy services with a higher level of predictability in pricing and supply is therefore indispensable to the economic transformation in CARICOM countries. Frankly, ladies and gentlemen, to effect the kind of transformation demanded by powering transport, the region requires the qualities of youth, not as a time of life, but as a state of mind. However, sadly, many persons within the region who find themselves sometimes at the apex of leadership of various sectors and institutions still have a reflexive attitude of rejection to new technology, new ideas, and sometimes new strategies, but in an ever-evolving global space. The net effect is sometimes a region seemingly marred by antiquated approaches and buffeted by perennial challenges. However, time waits on no one. The transition to electric vehicles is not just a trend, but a crucial step towards a more sustainable, clean, and prosperous future for our region. However, expectation that this transition would occur seamlessly along a simple adoption curve was always unrealistic. The higher capital cost of electric vehicles is often offset by a combination of lower life cycle costs and externality benefits. Capital cost premiums associated with electric vehicles are substantial, but they are declining. Nonetheless, the region is projected to move from roughly 19% electrification to 51% electrification by 2050. But history has thus far indicated that RE progress in the region has been organic and not accelerated. This therefore demands new approaches. Sales of electric cars are soaring in Europe and China, with the US further behind. But the rush of new launches is putting pressure on European manufacturers in particular, who are struggling to compete with cheap models coming out of China. In fact, according to the CFO of Mercedes-Benz, some manufacturers are pricing battery electric vehicles similarly to petrol variants despite higher costs of production amid intense price competition. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, economic dumping of vehicles has already crept into the EV market. Indeed, though EV sales in the US are still growing, the pace has slowed. In the first half of 2023, EV sales rose 49% from 1 year before, a slower rate than the 63% increase last year. Manufacturers who have adopted a strategy of hedging their bets on EVs by continuing to invest in hybrids, hydrogen-powered cars, and other alternative eco-friendly vehicles are also influencing market outcomes. In fact, much of the pressure on European car makers to switch to electric is coming from China, whose government has heavily subsidized the industry. Chinese manufacturers have never managed to export large numbers of petrol and diesel cars to Europe or the US, but now brands such as BYD, NIO, and the Chinese-owned MG are gaining market share relatively rapidly, to the alarm, of course, of the traditional car makers in Europe and the United States. The pressure, however, on the European industry has led to the EU recently launching an investigation into Chinese electric vehicle subsidies, a move that could eventually lead to tariffs on imports in an effort to protect the home industry. Nonetheless, EV sales are on pace to reach roughly 47 million in 2033, or 20% more than gasoline cars. This translates to a tenfold expansion in EV market over 12 years. This is of particular relevance as the EU is slated to ban the production of the internal combustion engine by 2035, with Nissan in Japan also following suit. Now, this move comes as policymakers worldwide tighten restrictions on vehicle emissions to promote a shift to EVs. In Europe, the new Euro 7 emission standards are on track to go into effect as early as July 2025, with some manufacturers determining that these rules will raise the cost of developing the ICE engines or the internal combustion engines to unsustainable levels. On our part, frankly, ladies and gentlemen, in my view, this will require a strategic shift in our development model to be even more inclusive. In fact, it is time that as a region, motor vehicles are recognized as tools of trade rather than merely for pleasure, and in so doing, reassess the applicable import duty framework. This would actively discourage the dumping, and I use dumping in a classic economic term, of internal combustion engine vehicles in our market when the transition to EVs become more pronounced and emission standards in Europe render the ICE vehicles uncompetitive in that market, but continue to be viable in the Caribbean. This requires urgent legislative intervention. Similarly, while we are cognizant that several CARICOM member states offer several incentives to encourage the procurement of hybrid and electric vehicles, including the removal or significant reductions in import duty, there is potential abuse of the process looming. Indeed, some EV manufacturers offer subscription-based upgrades to unlock additional features or capabilities of the vehicles, such as increased range, improved performance, or advanced driver assistance systems. It might seem counterintuitive, but automakers have been increasingly paywalling features and services for their vehicles, including some features that are physically built into the car already. These features are being charged for on a monthly basis. This, therefore, is likely to constitute significant revenue leakage to our already fiscally strapped member states, as the applicable motor vehicle import duties or revenue foregone, as the case may be, by the countries, are founded on the CIF value of the vehicles. If features that would have normally enhanced the value of the vehicles are being implemented on a subscription basis, usually monthly, then the revenue foregone or collected, as the case may be, becomes compromised. For automakers, the advantage of this model is clear. Not only do they get a stream of recurring revenue for years after the initial purchase, but they can hope to maintain a longer-term relationship with the customer and build brand loyalty. Indeed, amid supply chain disruptions, geopolitical tensions, and the transition towards green mobility, manufacturers are, frankly speaking, trying to work out how to preserve their profit margins. It was all made possible by the advent of the over-the-air software updates, which were pioneered by Tesla around a decade ago and are now entering the mainstream. Today's vehicles are more internet connected and computerized than ever before. In fact, frankly speaking, I think we're driving mobile computers. But if companies can reach deep inside a vehicle to add new capabilities and tweak things from a distance. Brands such as Lexus, Toyota, Subaru invite owners to pay for the convenience of being able to lock or start the cars remotely through an app. In some BMWs, you can pay to unlock the automatic high beam headlights, which dim for oncoming traffic. Indeed, in 2020, BMW floated the idea of pay-as-you-go heated seats and steering wheels. General Motors and Ford both offer subscription plans for their hands-free highway driving systems. In fact, Stellantis, which was formerly Fiat Chrysler, Ford, and GM, each aim to generate at least $20 billion in annual revenue from software services by 2030. In this regard, automakers argue that this approach can also allow them to streamline manufacturing by building cars to more uniform specifications, with the proviso being that down the line, owners can add on the features they want a la carte. All this points to is that there is a need for legislative reviews, grid modernization interventions, joint procurement practices, the advent of nearshoring to treat its supply chain disruptions, and frankly, where appropriate, the renegotiation of electricity distribution licenses. Now, specifically, the strategic interventions required should include matters of incentives and subsidies, obviously, the charging infrastructure development. All of this has to be underpinned, of course, by education and awareness campaigns. We have to look at fleet electrification programs, as well as the requisite supportive policies and regulations. Now, these recommendations are by no means exhaustive, and neither they're intended to be, but are merely indicative of what I hope would be the precursor to a clear-eyed and frank discourse over the next 2 days on the issues which confront us as we collectively interrogate the issues affecting the region's transition to electric vehicles. CARICOM's position is that renewable energy is key to the region's energy and economic security. In that vein, the Secretariat continues to engage its regional and international partners to address the risks associated with the sustainable energy transition and to promote and scale up private sector investments in renewable energy. It's within this context that the CARICOM Secretariat is pleased to be a strategic partner for this forum, along with the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, the Caribbean Development Bank, and other partners. And indeed, tonight, as part of the CSEF VIII, we are not only planning for the just transition to resilient and secure energy, we are also here to celebrate our current successes through the CARICOM Energy Achievement Award, which will be announced in a few minutes. But ladies and gentlemen, with ambition, innovation, and partnership, we can collectively reduce our carbon footprint by accelerating the deployment of renewable and low carbon sources of energy and the electrification of end-use sectors, particularly transport. Let us therefore seize this opportunity to take the region further along the pathway to power in transport. With that, I thank you.